He just makes a lot of the simple things look the way starters make them look simple. I thought that was going to be my take on Brock today. And then he comes out and does some of the crazy stuff that the good starters do. And I just was blown away by the way he played against the Bucs.
It was an incredible first half. I mean, it really was. I think a lot of times when a backup quarterback gets thrown in a game, he doesn't have much time to think, right? The way Jimmy went down. When a backup quarterback comes into a game based off an injury, there is just all of a sudden you're warming up and you're in the game.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like, get in. It snowballs fast.
Which
and then
is
you just
what
kinda,
Sorry, keep going.
so you never know after that game, like, is that who he is, good or bad, right? If a guy shits the bed, you're like, well, it's not even a fair situation. Or if a guy's really good, well, they didn't have the scouting report. There is no way around what happened today, right? I would imagine Todd Bowles and those guys, I'd be stunned if they didn't break down several of their best opponents that he played the last couple years in college to get like a legit scouting report on him as a player. Like, they watched Iowa State film this week, the players and the coaches on Brock Purdy, and he still destroyed them. Now, Brock, who many people this week said, I think people are overvaluing like Jimmy's role. And I think last week when Jimmy got hurt, I'm like, oh, there's no way they're going to be a potent in the playoffs. And you start realizing they are not dependent on this guy to be Burrow, Allen, Lamar Jackson. Like, they're just not. Like, he really just, he hasn't turned the ball over and he's played well on third down. But Jimmy Garoppolo was not explosive in the red zone. And what did they do immediately today? Several red zone touchdowns. Like, this guy, how many red zone touchdowns do they have the last couple weeks? He had a couple last week. He had a couple this week. He obviously ran one in. He brings an element.
50% red zone TD percentage coming into last week, and the previous 3, I think, is what the number was, something like that.
So then this week, obviously Debo had the one run, which Purdy doesn't do much, but like, he gets credit, like being the starting quarterback for a red zone touchdown. And obviously he runs one in, and I'm forgetting some of my plays now. I guess the Ayuk one at the end to make it 28-0 was outside of the red zone. But he was good. I mean, he's very poised, yet he is athletic enough to make shit happen. Now, occasionally,
the McCaffrey was outside of the red zone.
And the McCaffrey was outside the red zone. He does the 360 stuff, but he's not. I think sometimes Jimmy, people think he's afraid to let it rip down the sideline. Like, he will throw it over the middle. Brock will too, right? You saw Tom today throwing it over the middle. The middle of the field is not Jimmy's problem. He just refuses to kind of let it rip outside the numbers. I would say Brock Purdy is not hesitant to do that at all. Would you agree?
I also think I would agree with that. And I was asking you this beforehand, something that Purdy made me think today about Garoppolo. And I don't know the answer to this. I'd be curious to talk to somebody who's watched a lot of Jimmy's college tape or somebody who was around Jimmy in college. Did they throw the ball down the field in college? Because I think part of it with Garoppolo is he's just not that accurate on those balls that he really cuts loose down the field, and Brock is. And it makes me wonder, did Jimmy do that before he was a pro? Because Brock did, right? Like, you could have not a strong arm. I would say Baker's an example of this, right? Baker does not have a great arm, but Baker is comfortable cutting the ball loose downfield. He did it a ton. He's done it a ton in his career, right? I sometimes when Jimmy, whose arm is no worse than Brock's, if not a little better, it's not a thing that he appears to me to be very comfortable or confident doing. And the reason I feel that way is because I don't think he hits the target many times when he does it. Brock, whatever his limitations are, seems to hit the target down the field pretty well. It's something he's done a lot. Like at Iowa State, they did it a ton. He did it for over 12,000 yards in college. So that is one part of that I wonder about.
That's a pretty cool photo.
For those of you listening to the podcast, Matt Barrows tweeted a photo, post-game locker room scene, and it's Kyle sitting in a locker next to Brock, just kind of leaning back, relaxing, talking to him, and Brock just sitting there. And Kyle's asking, would you sign like 5 years, $80 million right now? Or so he's just, I think I saw somebody in the chat say this earlier, checks every box. You can only play as many games as you've played. He's only played one start and one game. And and careers are long and seasons are long. And once upon a time, Carson Wentz was almost an MVP, and then he was on his third team in 3 years. So it takes time to really become whatever it is that you're going to become. But I'm with you. Like, I think what you said a second ago, where I interrupted you because I'm so excited to talk about Purdy. Sometimes there's something to be said for what Brock and what Baker did last week. Every athlete's always just trying to get into the zone, right? Where you don't think. You're not thinking, you're just playing. And, I think that's kind of the situation both of them were in Thursday for Baker and Brock last week when he came in for Jimmy. It's different when you have a week to be the guy, when they've got a week to prepare for you, but it's different when you have a week to think about it and prepare for it and cloud your brain with all the things that can cloud your brain. And I that to me is where the value in watching him play against the Bucs was he showed us how he did when there was no time to think. And then he showed us how he did when there was time to think. Now the Bucs run a short week, just like Seattle will be, whatever. You can only take the steps that are in front of you. And right now, especially after you got crushed on the first play of the game.
That's where I think for being a young quarterback, because we talk so much about Trey Lance and his inexperience. And Trey, in a weird way, obviously is an underdog because no schools like Brock Purdy, he could not have gone to Iowa State and started over Brock Purdy, right? He couldn't have beat him out. That just was, they didn't even offer him a scholarship. So he wasn't offered to go there. But then when he does go to a school, he only plays the one season. I don't think they put like FCS games on the board, on the gambling board. Like, I don't think you can just bet in the regular season North Dakota State versus Montana. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, you can't.
But if you could, they are the heavy favorite in every game they play. Where Brock Purdy played in a lot of games where, despite he's there, a lot of people are probably saying, is he good enough to be a Big 12 starter? And then he's on a team that's not supposed to be as good as a lot of teams they're playing. But he gets to play in all these games. So even the Trey play, like, only got the one season. This guy got 4 fucking years. 4 years. Of just a lot of game action against a lot of people who made a lot of money. From Matt Rule to Dave Aranda to Lincoln Riley's teams to Mike Gundy's teams, like, played at a pretty high level of football. And was an underdog the whole time, even though he was having success. And I'm not saying being the underdog, but that mentality, like watching him talk this week, he's just an impressive, like, serious cat who just had to re-believe in himself despite having a lot of success. And then he got drafted in the NFL. Like, ultimately, if you just meet someone who's in his 20s and he goes, I got drafted in the NFL, you would have, even if he wasn't in the NFL anymore, like, holy shit, that's this guy. If you had never met him, you'd be like, where'd you play college football? How many years did you play in the league? Well, that's an incredible accomplishment. But in Purdy's case, it's just like, oh, Mr. Irrelevant. Like, his own draft pick is its own unique thing, and rightfully so. It was literally the last pick in a draft. It was always the thing with baseball, right? Well, Mike Piazza, all these guys that could get drafted, it was like 700 rounds. So we didn't give it. No one ever asked, for the most part, unless you're a super high draft pick, what round you were drafted in baseball, because there's no context to be had.
Wasn't Mike's dad friends with Tommy Lasorda? Wasn't that?
Yeah, it was like, he went to Italian dinners at his house when he was a kid or whatever. But in football, if you met someone, I was drafted in the NFL, your first comment is probably like, what round, right? Or like, there's context when you're drafted.
Yeah.
And then to have to make the team, be a third string quarterback, what happened, the way it happened. And then to me, to make your first start, and like any quarterback worth their salt, they always say, well, it's not me versus Tom Brady. We're never on the field at the same time. But it is Tom fucking Brady's return to the Bay Area. I mean, it's a pretty unique game in the history of Kyle Shanahan era. Tom Brady came to the Bay Area, and Brock Purdy was a starting quarterback.
Yeah. And I mean,
but he doesn't play like this little engine that could, right?
That's one thing I respect. And if you do chip on the shoulder thing and that's your thing, that's fine too. But I think, and I said this the other day, one thing that impresses me about Brock Purdy is that he has the confidence. He just believes in himself. He doesn't do chip on the shoulder. And, Tom Brady's part of his story, right, is chip on the shoulder. Everyone passed me and it drove me, which is however you succeed. But I do think with Brock,
I mean, one of the most famous clips is him when he has the long hair talking to Steve Sabol. It was when him and his dad, remember, went on a walk in like the 5th round. He was like, it was a tough day.
He won championships.
In fairness to him, like, it was a tough day.
Absolutely. And that's fine. It's just, you feel how you feel. But Brock gives off an energy that he just really now Tom believes in himself. It's just a different way. I don't know. I like that about Brock, that it's not chip on the shoulder. Nobody believed in me. Maybe he thinks that. I don't know. But
Well, from
it
a
doesn't
football
seem like he
perspective,
plays to prove anybody wrong. He's just playing to play to his ability, whatever.
well, I just say from a football perspective, a couple things he got going because clearly he looks small, right? From the eye test, obviously relative to NFL players, but you're just sitting on your couch. He's the smallest guy on the field. He's accurate. He clearly tough, which to me is a important characteristic. Like one thing watching the Jets today, I can see why those guys like Mike White. Guy, he literally got KO'd twice. One time had to go to the bench, comes back. The other time had to go to the locker room, and Tony Romo goes, yeah, I've broken ribs before. That sure as hell looks what that happened there. And he came back in the game both times. And there was just a level of, we don't talk about it enough because like arm strength, size, movement, like toughness. Those guys fucking feed off that shit. Why? Because Trent has to be tough. Kittle has to be tough. Debo has to be tough. Juszczyk, Mason, obviously McCaffrey. Like toughness is a huge element of football. And when they don't think your quarterback's tough and then you're questionable, you're Zach Wilson, right? They can't stand you. When you're tough and you're making plays, it's just, I would say the nature of the sport, guys just gravitate toward you, right? It's just a natural gravitation toward, like one thing with Tom Brady in the history of his life, always tough motherfucker and always a playmaker. So, and he was just like this leader, like lead us into battle, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were stories this week of like Brock screaming at guys at practice and guys were like,
Trent Williams quote.
What did Debo say last week? He's got nuts. He called a timeout without even asking Kyle if he could.
The play he made, so they scored a touchdown on the first drive. Their second drive's terrible. Right? The defender's up, he tries to throw the screen to Kittle, kind of throws it over him. Wasn't a bad pass, it just was not a connection. McCaffrey,
and they got it, then they got it in midfield because Bowles tried like a 60-yard field goal.
Yeah, which wasn't close. It was short and wide.
What a terrible attempt.
It was really bad.
It was bad.
Even Burkhardt was basically like, well, all right, here we go. We watched him in warm-ups. He barely made this one in warm-ups. He made a 50.
Was a career. He never even attempted one that long in his career.
Yeah. So that drive was bad. They punt. The play he made, I don't know if you have a favorite Purdy play from the game, but one of them was the Olay play 2 drives later. I thought on the third drive where he kind of stepped up, kind of ad-lib, hits Kittle over the middle for a first down. It was a first down play, and then he hits Kittle over the middle for the first down.
One that was kind of high or like one in his stomach?
It might have been a little high. That one led to a touchdown. And then the next possession was he rolls out right. Joe Tryon comes charging in. He goes, lay on him, lets him run by, and then throws a dime to Debo. I mean, that play to the sideline, I don't know if it was a linebacker. It was over one guy in front of another guy. That was one of the great 49er quarterback plays I've seen in a long time. And Jimmy's made some great ones. I mean, we've talked about Jimmy, but that was the play of the day. Avoid the rush, sidestep, do that thing, then step up and drop a dime in a really tight window to Debo. It was an incredible throw. Incredible.
His touchdown that got reviewed like 7 times to McCaffrey was pretty incredible dime as well. I mean, hits him right here, over the shoulder, DB below him, can't underthrow it. I mean, that was really the moment of like, holy, because it went 21-0 and it felt like the team they're playing, the route is on. Now it didn't, I don't know if the game I felt was going to end up 35-7, but it felt at worst 27-10. Like this game, honestly, it felt over a 21-0 guy when you factor in their opponent and how anemic their offense is. But also where it felt over is like this guy can keep putting pressure on them to throw the ball. That's something the 49ers all year we've talked about is like, here comes another 17-play drive to end up in a 10-yard field goal. It feels like they can fucking score touchdowns now. Like score touchdowns from inside the red zone and outside the red zone. Throwing the ball. We know they can bust runs. Hopefully Debo can come back. He can bust runs from everywhere. When McCaffrey looks like that, he can bust runs. Ayuk and Kittle can, yards after the catch make things happen. But how often have they broke it down a little bit, I think, in the second half, some of the air yards. Like, it just, that's not the 49ers that we have witnessed this season with Jimmy Garoppolo. He brought an element, which feels weird because he's way smaller, of throwing the ball down the field, like pressuring you. What defensive coordinators, I don't know who started this, but everyone's stolen it now. We protect every blade of grass. And when you play explosive quarterbacks, like Herbert's on TV right now, Mahomes, all these guys, Burrow, you kind of do, because at any moment, like a 25-yard pass across the field, you see the play. Did you see the highlight of the Mahomes like fling to McKinnon?
Oh my God, yeah.
But just you play these guys, they're flinging it, they're throwing it, they're just Allen's throwing dimes. That has just not been the Niners thing. And even Ayuk today, it's like, is he a threat now to go deeper? Not deep, but like just deeper, which is an element they haven't had. And what did they do? Their fourth touchdown of the day to make it 28-0 came on a double move to Ayuk, who was wide fucking open at the end zone. The classic, all career long, it's like, oh, Kyle's going to run, go to the locker room. Instead, they hit a big play, and he's like, fuck it, let it rip, Brock.
Second week in a row he's done that. Second week in a row he's done that with Brock.
It feels like he trusts this guy more than the other two quarterbacks. Not really even arguable right now.
It does feel that
based
way.
on his play calling. Based on his play calling, he trusts him more than the other two guys.
It could be. I mean, I also would wonder, you might be right. I do wonder if some of this stuff gets called. It's just that is the throw that gets made on, like the Ayuk play got called, just the ball didn't go to Ayuk. It would go to whatever, McCaffrey in the flat.
Purdy is hurt. But he didn't come out of the game. He's got an oblique injury.
Oh, okay. All right. Brandon Ayuk has to lead the league in impactful games with 2 catches.
Yeah.
But when one of them's a 32-yard touchdown, I thought getting Kittle involved, he got Kittle involved early. He threw one a little high, but that happens.
I feel like when you get the ball to Kittle early, it's a little like when Debo has a big play early. It kind of sets the physical tone because he's going to lower his shoulder and make you feel him in the secondary. And the other thing is they're missing their 2 starting safeties. That's just good coaching. Like 85 should cook when you got backup safeties. Like, he'll be thinking like, I'm going to put one of these guys on the sideline when he tried.
Also, it tells you what kind of game it is going to be, because there are plenty of games where Kittle does not touch the football early. And you're like, is George just going to have to block today? And he did. He blocked for Debo on that. That was actually a pretty cool formation on Debo's touchdown. But I think it just kind of establishes, like, you guys, I would imagine as a defensive coordinator, if you asked them to rank who they're most concerned about, obviously George is very high, but it doesn't feel like George would be number 1 on their list just because Debo's probably number 1 on their list. Again, I don't know how you pick. That's the one thing you notice when Debo gets hurt is like, well, they still got other guys to give the ball to. They still have McCaffrey. They still have Ayuk. They still have George. Jennings, I don't think got a catch today.
Well, I think Olsen was like, you look in this huddle.
Oh, he did have one.
This was before Debo got hurt. He's like, they might have 4 of the most unique playmakers in the league. It was like McCaffrey, Kittle, Juszczyk, and Debo. For their positions, like they can just obviously we've well established Kelsey's the best tight end when it comes to pass catching. I mean, I think he's going to go down as the greatest ever. But there is just an element of George and Juszczyk, like they become a Swiss Army knife because they can do it all. Right? They're just not a fullback in the NFL like Kyle. And obviously Debo is just one of the most unique players we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And McCaffrey is, I mean, clearly one of the best pass-catching running backs of his generation.
Well, the touchdown catch was to have the ball. He had it. It got dislodged. He still kept the toe down and re-caught the football. It was pretty impressive.
It was sweet.
That was a great catch.
He can, and I think Alvin Kamara can kind of do this too. I'm trying to think of other guys. Like, he can just turn into a wide receiver. Right? Like when he's on the outside and playing the ball, he turns into wide receiver skills. Like some running backs are good wide receivers. Like you get him, like Austin Eckler. You get him on swing routes. You get him the ball in space. He's natural at it. A lot of running backs, can catch the ball. And then there are other guys that, like, if Christian McCaffrey just had to start at slot receiver for the game, he could have no problem get you 10 for 100. And just run, like, little option routes and just, work the middle of the field, like kind of just turn into Edelman or Welker for a game. He could do it. But he's probably couldn't do it, like, physically. He's built his body up a little bit to take the pounding, right? Those guys, you see some shots of him. He's just a little thicker than like Edelman look like.
You could thin him up and just put him out there the whole time if you wanted.
Honestly, not a crazy off-season thought.
Ryan Vogelsong on the stream says what the announcer said was the 4 most versatile players in one huddle.
True.
So, what I was going to say though is just I think that you wondered how would it's one thing to make the plays. It's another thing to look like you're completely in control. And I think that's when you hear the quotes from Trent, when you hear the quotes from Ayuk, Debo. I think what they're getting at is that Brock is in total control. You can't really tell someone else what to do if you don't have your room in order, right? And clearly, Brock is very confident that he knows what everyone's supposed to be doing on every play, because you don't step in and tell someone else what to do and have it be received properly unless you know what you're doing. And that was the other thing today. I just thought he looked like he knew what was supposed to be happening on every play. He knew where people were supposed to be, and he seemed to make the right decision a lot.
One key, though, is through your preparation, toughness, the respect, the way you go about it. Clearly, he had all that. Then once you play, like to maintain the respect, you got to make plays. Right? Like what's Charles Woodson thing? Work hard, make plays. Part of why making plays is on work hard, make plays, because working hard is what's expected in the NFL. But then once the game starts, like you got to produce. And that fucking kid produced pretty immediately. It was like, this is kind of crazy. Like it was universally, everyone pretty much accepted it. I mean, our text messages, I'm sure, were similar from all sorts of people. Obviously, Twitter was going nuts with just, you couldn't watch it going, is this serious? Because we've all seen random backups make a play or two. It's another thing to just have a half where you're just throwing up 28 points. And you're playing a huge role in it. That's another thing, right? The 49ers have a lot of quarterbacks that are like, yeah, you just won that game 24-7, but what did he really do? And a lot of it's been void, or valid. And it's like, not going to pretend like the quarterback, didn't do anything, but probably was on the scale of didn't do anything, or was he Patrick Mahomes? They've had some didn't do much. Today was not that. I mean, the kid was slinging it.
Made plays. Josh Dubow tweets, Nick Bosa on Brock Purdy, quote, "We have a quarterback." I have no idea how to read that quote. I think it means we have a quarterback, but it could just mean we have a quarterback. So
yeah,
I'll withhold judgment on that quote till we watch the tape.
This is just too funny to hold on. Did you see that Trey Greenlaw took his interception ball at midfield? Fred Warner's like, you got to do it. Convinced him to do it. Went up to Tom Brady and got him to sign it.
And Tom did it.
Tom did it, yeah. He said he fangirled out on Tom.
On the field. Who had
so think about this. One of the Niners star players on the star unit of the team, the defense, goes up to the other quarterback and gets him to sign his interception ball. Like that's obviously Tom. It's not like you have to, describe who Tom Brady is to some random person. But like that kind of encompasses what today was. And that was Brock Purdy's moment against that. Like most people there were there to see Tom. Obviously the 49ers win, but like a lot of people came to that game in the secondary market to watch Thomas Brady play a game against the 49ers. And Brock Purdy came out the star.
If the Niners win that game like 35-31, do you think Tom is willing to a blowout? Everyone the game's been over for a minute. Tom's probably already processed it. It's a little easier maybe as opposed to
I think Tom's kind of hit the Tiger Woods part of his career where he's pretty cool in most of these situations. I don't think I've seen any situation where Tom has blown off like other players.
Nick Foles.
Super Bowl, though.
Twice. Regular season.
What was the second time?
I think Foles beat him again later, didn't he?
I don't remember.
I think Foles has beaten him post Super Bowl. Although now that I say that, I'm trying to figure out how it would have happened. Like the Jags.
I give you a pass. Super Bowl loss.
Eddie says, "Did Tom shake Purdy's hand after the game?" Yes, he did.